Coming up on May 3rd for Cinco de Mayo weekend at the venue Riyadh season in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, Saúl Canelo Álvarez will be defending his unified super middleweight championship and unifying for a two-time undisputed championship with William Scull. Currently, William Scull has a record of 23 wins, 0 losses, and 0 draws, with 9 of those wins coming by way of knockout. He is 32 years old and has a height of 5'11.5". His reach is not listed on BoxRec. On the other hand, Canelo Álvarez has a height of 5'7.5" with a reach of 70.5". His record is 62 wins, 2 losses, and 2 draws, with 39 of those wins coming by way of knockout. Now, let's begin with William Scull's record. Scull's record, not to say the least, is extremely lackluster. He is a contender that seemed to have just sprung up out of the clouds and been given a mandatory by the IBF a year ago. In such, Canelo vacated his title 1 year ago, stating that he would not fight Scull and that he would instead defend his title against more worthy contenders. Scull, in such, gained the IBF World Super Middleweight Championship against Vladimir Shishkin in an extremely close matchup, in which Scull won by a unanimous decision. Now, Scull is slated to fight one of the greatest boxers of this generation and one of the greatest Mexican fighters of all time. Canelo, I believe, doesn't really need an introduction, especially when one goes over his resume. Their resumes are near polar opposites, in which Scull has fought one European level to fringe world level contender, while Canelo has continually fought world level contenders after world level contenders after world level contender, and the list would go on with that singular word. Now, we are not really going to go over Canelo's run of form in any of his weight classes except super middleweight and the super middleweight run following Bivol. So, let's look at Canelo's last 6 fights. Canelo in 2022, on May 7th, lost a dominant unanimous decision to Dimitri Bivol. That was a fight in which Canelo was way out of his depth. Bivol was a very bad style matchup for Canelo, a skillful, robotic tactician that outboxed, outjabbed, outworked Canelo in every way, and basically showed Canelo that he really is not the best in the world. Now, mind you, Canelo was going back up to light heavyweight, but Canelo had succeeded at light heavyweight, had good power at that weight class, and just was the worst man on the night. Following this, Canelo had a contractually obliged victory over Gennady Golovkin in a trilogy fight, a dominant win over John Ryder. However, many believe this was actually a lackluster performance by Canelo. A dominant win over Charlo, which Canelo put on a pretty good performance. Munguia, in which I believe Canelo definitely was cruising through that fight and not really getting out of third gear. And finally, Canelo has a win over Berlanga. Now, in this video, I would like to address, as I have addressed in many of my past Canelo videos, how much in his prime he really is in, or how far away he is from his prime. Now, recently I rewatched some of Canelo's fights, most notably against Callum Smith and Billy Joe Saunders. And I noticed that Canelo definitely was trying much harder in those fights. in the Munguia fight, it didn't seem to me that Canelo really was far away from his prime, or that his power or stamina had really diminished, but rather that he seemed to just be cruising the fight in a lower gear, meaning that he wasn't trying, essentially. He wasn't using his abilities to the fullest potential. He wasn't utilizing all of his attributes, and especially he was not as aggressive in those fights. Now, in the Charlo fight, Canelo was pretty aggressive, but in the Munguia fight, I believe that although Canelo was somewhat aggressive, he wasn't showing aggressivity to the level of the Plant fight and the Saunders fight and the Smith fight. And so I believe that Canelo is cruising many of his fights on third gear, maybe going to fourth gear occasionally and kind of collecting the paychecks, and that's completely fine. However, that's led to him receiving 5 unanimous decisions in a row. Mind you, they were pretty dominant ones, but nonetheless, they were unanimous decisions that were no knockout, no sort of ferociousness in any of those fights compared to his previous ones. Scull is no power puncher, and in light of this, do I think Scull is going to pose any threat to Canelo? Well, if one is talking about punching power, Scull could land his straight right hand clean on Canelo's chin 1,000 times, and I do not believe Canelo would go down. 9 KOs in one's record is not going to break Canelo's chin. However, as seen in the Munguia fight, Soras, who had 6 KOs in 25 wins, KO'd Munguia with 1 punch. But Canelo has a much better chin than Munguia, and his chin is a chin that I believe rivals that of Gennady Golovkin, and I'm sure many would agree. But the real question is, what will Canelo do in this fight? And will Canelo try to go for the knockout? Will Scull put on a world-class, once-in-a-lifetime performance and upset this fight? Will Scull's record not be a reflection of his true ability, or will Scull's style be too much for Canelo's quality over quantity, feet-planted style of boxing? Now, Scull's chin has never been tested. Canelo's power is one that many giants should be weary of, and Canelo is most notably deemed a giant slayer for routinely fighting individuals who are 20 pounds heavier than him. In Canelo's last 5 fights, well, really in Canelo's last 3 fights, although he has gone the distance, he has fought individuals who are all taller than him. However, in his Munguia fight, this is the fight which is of most note in Canelo fighting an individual who's much bigger than he is. And in that fight, he was able to knock Munguia down with an uppercut that I do not believe he put the largest force in. I believe the left hook I believe the uppercut he threw in the Billy Joe Saunders fight had much more force behind that punch, and that broke Saunders' face, literally. And although that uppercut was thrown with more of the hip gesture, Canelo definitely has more power than the uppercut he threw with Munguia. And so, if Canelo is to land clean on Scull, the question is, how will Scull take that punch? If Scull can take Canelo's power, which is something I doubt, then maybe Scull does have a route to victory. His style could give Canelo some trouble, but Canelo has so much more experience, so much more power, a great chin, a great resume, and a great legacy overall, that I believe that Canelo, in light of his last 5 performances, this time will put on a performance of a lifetime. And although it's not necessarily against a elite opponent, it will be a performance in which Canelo is able to most likely dominate and possibly knock out William Scull. For sure, I would like to see Canelo stop an opponent. I would like to see an older Canelo, a more vicious Canelo. And I would like to see Canelo show his greatness in which he goes to 4th gear at least. So for my official prediction, and for my prayers, I hope that this time Canelo stops Scull in the 6th round. This is Zachary Cloutier at Ringside.